Good morning. It's 5:02 a.m. on January 13, 2013. And that's Pacific Coast time, North American continent. Today's a little cold. My voice is a little bit rough. I've been out feeding the rocket mass heater in the dome because it got down into the low 20s last night. And I want to keep we have some semi-tropical plants that I wanted to keep warm. Plus, I think maybe the hummingbird or hummingbirds will go into the dome, so I left the small window open for them so they could get in if they wanted, if they can sense the heat, because they're hanging around this year. We have the rufous hummingbirds that overwinter, and one other variety, I forget their name. They're interesting creatures, though. How they can possibly survive is just, the cold is just phenomenal. The rocket mass heater, by the way, is quite nice, even though I have yet to do all of the cob. When I finish all the cob, that'll make it much more effective because it'll trap the heat within the mass, whereas now it can radiate out through some of the holes through the urbanite. But the mass component is, when mated to these hyper-efficient rocket stoves, is really phenomenal because all of the heat of the material you burn is trapped within the system, either within the radiative drum immediately, and mine is basically uncovered, so it radiates out quite a bit. I'll eventually get it mostly covered, actually, with cob, so as to force the heat further into the system. But at the moment, it's just one of too many chores and not enough hands and time to get to them. Anyway, though, but these rocket mass heaters are truly phenomenal. The amount of BTUs you can get out of just waste material. I have yet to even set about getting really any wood. I'm just burning the little tiny sticks that fall from the tree, the volunteer wood, that I did not really have a use for because much of it was too small to bother picking up for things like hugelkultur or any other permaculture use. But it's quite nice for just, raking up handfuls of it and using it to heat the dome. So if you have a need for some method for heating that's as highly efficient as you can get and uses biomass, that is to say burnable material, check out the rocket mass heaters. There's on the YouTube, and they're also over at permies.com, which is a permaculture forum area that's well run and extremely packed with information. I mean, these guys have got the planetary repository for the stuff in English and a couple of other languages. Anyway, so there's that. I'm doing a Wujo today because I've been asked to talk about a couple of issues, or a couple of things. One of them is the idea of self-healing through meditation, and the other is some aspects of the Global Coastal event. And I'm going to do the self-healing part first. It's the most difficult to really explain. It's the easiest to put into words because basically you give up on it because words are inadequate to the description. At best, let's just say that words are attempting to describe the surface of the mirror rather than the image within it. Words are so totally inadequate that the best you can do is to say, well, it sort of looks like this, and I sort of found it over there, and I sort of did this with it. And that's the best you can do because it's entirely a personal experience at a level that may be too unique as specific cases to be able to be meaningfully generalized into a general case. Other than at some very broad level of a description. In other words, I had, getting to the specifics, I had 20-year plus incidents of eczema on my legs. It was the kind that is at the surface of the skin, and it took over the outside of both shins. It originated as a result of a chemical burn and just kind of trashed the skin, and it never recovered, and then it developed into this eczema that hung with me for 20 years. Then in the process of meditation one day, now you have to be a meditator, and I'm not going to go through all of that, but I was doing a sitting meditation. I was doing a sitting seiza. I don't think it matters. And I had gotten into a fairly deep meditation, but I was not all the way down into alpha because I was still sort of wandering around at that stage where you have a little bit of delta control and a little bit of conscious mind before you drop 100% into will. And so I was at that stage. If it's meaningful to you, it's meaningful to you. Otherwise, I'm sorry, I just can't help you. Unless you go there, and this is truly an experiential sort of thing. Unless you've been there, the words may be less than adequate to explain it. So anyway, I was in that particular state, and I extended my consciousness forward from its usual center and up towards it was an upward direction to the right at an oblique angle. I noticed an area that was filled with what looked like a roughened but interconnected cottage cheese material, lumpy, whereas everything else around it was smooth. And so it felt as though that this lumpy cottage cheese material was pushing through. It looked like it was sort of pushing through a membrane, trying to push through a membrane, but it felt like that was connected to my eczema. I had no intention in doing that meditation, by the way. I was not seeking any kind of self-healing or any of that. I was just doing meditation. Had no clue that it was that I was going to get into that particular day. This was in January, oddly enough. A number of years back. I think it was probably 2001 maybe. Maybe it's the year 2000, one of those. Anyway, and so it was very cold out, as it is now, and I was sitting seiza. It's much better on my back in cold periods to sit the Zen style, as opposed to many of the yoga positions, especially since my zafu is got the crap beat out of it. Anyway, though, so I found this cottage cheese material. And it didn't look right. I didn't like the looks of it. And that was really, and then I sort of felt that it was connected to the eczema. So what I did was to create at that point what are known as meditation hands or mittens, because you don't really have fingers. They're not quite that distinct. And anyway, but they're quite clearly internal, if you will, extensions of your eye-hand coordination, part of your consciousness. That's why they're called meditative hands. There are other meditative tools you have, but these are specifically involving the body. They take you out of the meditative process at a lower level than you would normally exit. And so you're still not conscious, but the body is brought back into the process by the creation of these hands, because that loops back in that connection of the brain where the eye-hand coordination exists. Anyway, and so what I did was to take these hands and I pushed on the cottage cheese stuff and found that I could smooth it out like one might smooth out covers on a bed, where you just sort of run your hands over it loosely. There was no resistance or anything. It's not like it fought or was in any way physical there. It was simply a matter of actually having to do it, and the stuff was all smooth. I noticed when I came out of the meditative process at that point, or later on in that session, that there had been a distinct change in the feeling of the eczema on both shins. And within the next 30 days, it was gone. The skin simply had to replace itself, and the eczema process was not recreated as part of the template. And basically what I had done was to find a connection in my brain. I found that part of the connection that was part of the process of the eczema, which also involved eye-hand coordination and the hand-brain connection, as I'll explain in a second. But I found this place, and I smoothed out the template that is the energetic template through which the atoms express themselves to be my body. And so if we look at it from an energy perspective, this makes a lot of sense. We're not really solid beings. Our minds are just diluted by our sensory apparatus to thinking that we're solid. We're actually sitting here flickering at the rate of 22 trillion times a second. We turn on and off like a strobe light. And everything around us flickers at that rate, 22 trillion times a second. But our minds are trapped by our senses into only seeing things out of those 22 trillion flickers a second. We're going to be lucky if we see 50. And that's what we think of as reality in motion. And if you're really sick, for instance, if you're listening to this and you've got the flu, your poor brain is occupied with all of your body symptoms. You're going to be lucky to be picking up 20 or 30 impressions in any given second of the reality around you. And so we think this is solid. And plus, since we are energy, we take our fingers, which are energy, and we push them down on the table, which is also energy. There's a feedback loop that's established by the very nature of the reality of our consciousness that makes us think that the table's actually solid. But it's not. If you really want proof of this, go and look at, dig up John Chang's videos on YouTube and watch him push a chopstick through a table. Just whoosh, it goes right through. And what he doesn't tear the table, he just actually asks the table at the template level to please separate your molecules so that I can blend these two. And I have it on good authority that when you go and you chop these areas out of the table, the bamboo of the chopstick has actually merged with the wood material, not the formica, but the wood material of the table itself, such that the molecules are interlaced. There's no clear separation, which is an interesting effect. So basically, both of them merge, and at some point both of them are fluid for a minute, and then when they resolidify, and the template resolidifies it in the 22 trillion times a second process, they're blended back together. So here we are as energetic beings, flickering on 22 trillion times a second within this energetic universe. And we think of ourselves as solid, and we walk around and bump into things and feel them as solid because our minds are a little lame. Now, part of this whole process is that in order for us to have our bodies, we have these templates that are through which the what we think of as the solid atoms and all of these other energetic components express themselves. And so if you could go deep enough, you could get the template out of there, theoretically, and do such amazing things as, grow hair, change your skin color, maybe even grow a new limb. Salamanders and others do it. No reason we couldn't. It's a matter of getting at the template and telling those cells right there and those other nuons and bions and anu, which are the precursors to atoms, that you want them to express this particular way. And that's sort of what I did. The eczema had intended to express itself, and I just prevented it from expressing itself by altering the template that it had set up within my energetic process of my body. So if we were to envision it in one way, perhaps eczema can be thought of, I always thought of it not as bacterial invasion or any of that, although there is bacteria that gets into the destroyed skin from the scratching. Or the medicines that you put on there, which are also usually harsh and abrasive at some level chemically. And so they leave openings for the bacteria and stuff. I had always assumed that it was a process as opposed to a disease. That is to say, a condition that once established was very difficult to cure because the brain became involved. Because, of course, it would itch, you would scratch, it would start the whole process all over again. And there was a definitive cycle in there that I was well aware of. I just could never figure out any way of breaking the cycle. It was extremely difficult until I went in and did it in a meditative state and broke it not at the external consciousness level, but at the pre-consciousness template level. And what I basically did was to tell the eczema component that was pushing in as the cottage cheese area to go away, and pushed it back and smoothed everything out. Now, it could be that eczema, in that sense, is some form of an energetic parasite that inserts itself into our energetic bodies, which we cannot see, which we perceive as solid because of our poor brains being trapped at 30 to 60 cycles a second. Maybe it's actually, if we could see at a higher level frequency, maybe we'd see the eczema as this ugly kind of a thing that's attached to us, and we could pick it up and throw it off, and you'd be done with it. And maybe at one level, that's a good image to imagine what I did, was that I pushed on my internal template and pushed it off, and it fell off. Now, it took 30 days for the process to complete itself. The eczema didn't disappear instantly. There was no miracle cure. It wasn't anything that I could get Well, okay, I could actually probably go to the Catholic Church and say they have to canonize George Carlin, because I prayed to George Carlin and he came down and cured me from the grave. So, you know, but basically, no, that did not happen. I'd do that to irritate the church, though. Boy, that'd be fun. Wouldn't George Carlin make a hell of a saint? In any event,